Malcolm Hoenlein is with us, Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations. We call this the Weekly Update. Mr. Hoenlein, welcome back to JM in the AM.
Always good to be with you. Getting ready for Shabbos.
Let's start with, hey, Shabbos is in almost 13 hours. Calm down. Let's start with the positive. We always want to start with the positive, Mr. Hoenlein. Thank God it looked like a lot of people came out on a really beautiful weather day this past Sunday in New York City, despite all the concerns regarding security, despite all the people who said they're going to avoid the area as opposed to coming and celebrate Israel because of the enhanced security. With all of that, it looked like we had a really nice crowd there on Fifth Avenue, and I'm sure you regard that as a great piece of positive news to start our conversation.
It was very important, probably as important a time as ever, to show the solidarity with Israel. I think we can thank the mayor for his inspiring words to get people to come out to understand how important what it was to demonstrate solidarity with Israel. The fact that you had a Knesset delegation of 13, which I think they said was the largest, plus the Speaker of the Knesset and many other officials who came. The number of elected officials who came, I think the presence of two former mayors, a Republican and Democrat, also highlighted the absence. I think it's a mistake to have talked about it because all the media reports kept focusing on the fact of the person who wasn't there rather than the multitudes who did come out. And maybe in record numbers, but certainly in way more than in any recent year that I can recall. And we have to sustain it, though. It can't be just a once-a-year reaction where people are prepared to speak out and to demonstrate with their feet and with their dollars and with their involvement and with the elections coming up this year. You know, we had some outcomes that were very disturbing, and it can't be obscured. We have to continue to fight in November. And in the meantime, everybody register. Every community, every shul should be registering their voters. We've shown how a few votes can make a huge difference in races around the country and here too. And
right now in New York, if the election was held today based on the polls, the three serious progressives running would win easily. So
I do not call them progressives. I think it's the wrong term. Being progressive, it shouldn't be bad. Progress is good. I think we ought to describe them in other terms that really portray them as retrogressives.
Radicals? Would radicals work?
And extremists and radicals. And yes, that at least voters understand that we're talking about people who espouse views, whether they could be tied to the Sheikh Rahman, the blind sheikh, to care to other entities. It's all blatant. It's not deep research that you have to do. It's available.
And by the way, in your reaction to the parade opening, and this is really the reason I brought it up, not just to thank everyone for being there Sunday, and if people have to realize this, and Malcolm, I would love for you to just expound on this a drop. We're so spoiled in this country, and especially in this area. We're so spoiled by the general camaraderie that our community has with elected officials. Certainly spoiled compared to, other generations and other times and other places. But forget that for a moment. I just think it's important to remember that some of these public officials are really going out on a limb in the 2026 atmosphere to march in an Israel parade. And again, even though the people that generally marched on Sunday, the elected officials, have been friendly and have been, have worked with the community, etc. I'm not going to mention any names, but I could mention at least 3-4 names of people who, if they made a decision not to march, I'd get it. Meaning, again, if they were watching their back in the current political atmosphere. And I think it's a really important point to point out.
Well, I think you're right, but it should not have to be an act of courage or moral courage to be able to stand up and stand with Israel. And everybody's saying, well, it's only about Netanyahu. No, it isn't. You're not coming here to endorse a candidate or a particular policy. It's clear what the challenges are today. Everybody knows it, and then anybody who wasn't there has to be held to account for the failure to show up, both in terms of marchers, in terms of public officials. And then the public officials look at the sidelines. They know what the media coverage will be, and therefore knowing not coming should subject them to some penalties and reflect that in the polls. But we saw the elections and the failure to mobilize against Hamamwe, against other people who have such blatant hostile associations and whose views are so terrible, and talk about cutting aid, and in showing up at the parade, despite the fact that they espouse views that endanger Israel's security. It's, people have to be very disciplined and not just look at the superficial reactions, but look at what they really say. I'm really pro-Israel. I'm a progressive, Zionist, leftist, extremist, off the cliff. No. If you're gonna espouse the views that endanger and say I'm not committing to vote for any arms for Israel in the future, then you're not a friend of the community, and you're certainly not a friend of Israel.
I agree with you. But those who are on the fence, who have not done anything radical against Israeli policy or against what we would call a pro-Israel position, who then go ahead and march in the parade, I think it would be a good idea for their constituents to thank them. I think it would be a good idea not to take it for granted and to let them know that in this atmosphere especially, we're glad you showed up.
Absolutely. We should acknowledge them. I think thanking them is a step, but acknowledging it and showing appreciation is always a good thing. They're human beings. They get beaten up all the time. So when they get positive reaction, it's reinforcing. And absolutely, we should show that we appreciate those who stand up for us, but know the records, know what people really are standing for, because people approach me about some of the elected candidates, and it's clear that they've never even done a simple Google search to see that their views on issues of real concern to our community are often not good.
Right, understood. And by the way, you know who the most recent champion of cutting Israeli aid is? You know who the most recent champion of cutting U.S. financial aid to Israel is, Malcolm?
Yeah, Netanyahu.
Correct. So number one, as we've seen so many times, like you always say, somebody will be complaining in Washington about, a certain policy, and they'll say, but look, half your community agrees with me, on whatever issue there might be. Now, all these people that want to cut aid to Israel, all they have to do is point to the prime minister.
Well, so this is a program, and we've talked about it on the show over the years, that there have been many proposals that Israel has always wanted to become more independent. They dropped the economic aid many years ago already.
How long ago do you think that was, by the way? Seriously, I don't know. How long ago do you think that was around? 5 years? Oh, is this 10 years?
Close to between 5 and 10 years. Wow. Don't forget, it was phased out. It wasn't just an immediate cutoff. It was phased out, but it was discussed in the Obama years and before that. And it was Israel's initiative. And I can tell you from the Malcolm Hoenlein archives that I once went to Israel at the request of Secretary Schultz. He was then Secretary of State, to find out why Israel wouldn't accept the $7 billion in debt forgiveness at the time of the Iraq War that we gave to Egypt, we gave to many other countries. All of them immediately accepted it, and Israel rejected it. And it was cost-free. It wasn't any strings attached to it. It was just an acknowledgement of the imposition of the cost of the war. And you remember the scuds on Israel, and et cetera. And I went to see Prime Minister Shamir. In fact, I went over a weekend. I met him Shabbos afternoon. I walked to his house. We spoke for almost 2 hours. And he absolutely said no, because he was convinced by the Ministry of Treasury that, would send a message that Israel doesn't pay its debt. I said, it's not, you're not reneging on a debt. It's being forgiven. It's being forgiven for other countries too. He said, no, it'll hurt our credit ratings. I said, how does losing $7 billion in debt hurt your credit ratings? I said, I'm not an economist, and maybe there's some forces here I don't understand. but you would make you free because all of that foreign aid we were getting then was just going to service the debt to the United States. It was just paying the interest every year on $7 billion in debt. But he refused, and we adamantly would not give in, and eventually Israel did pay it off, and Israel stopped at the economic aid, so all the aid was military related.
So this story has to be late 80s. If Schultz,
yes.
Right? It has to be late 80s.
Right.
And then the gradual independence from financial aid starts around 2010, 2015 in that area?
When they finally are able to do it, as Israel's economy grew stronger and they paid off the debt, but remembering that the aid that Israel got in the interim was paying the interest on that debt. And now the aid program that they're talking about, I mean, it is being negotiated right now. There are teams led by Yechiel Leiter and the Director General of the Ministry of Defense on one side, and Mike Huckabee, Ambassador to Israel, the U.S., and military people have been meeting already to talk about the implementation of something that the Prime Minister has spoken about many times, and at a time when Israel's economy is being hit by the strong shekel impacting exports and other things, the cost of the war, it's particularly remarkable, and I think will be questioned by many people about the timing. But I don't believe it'll be a one-day decision. I think it's something that will be implemented over time, and that it be replaced by a strengthening of the U.S.-Israel strategic alliance. And that we saw during the war how much when the United States and Israel can work together, but it would also go to development of the joint weapons and implementation, construction of new systems. And the Prime Minister, as you said, has been a primary proponent. There are people who question it and who are not sure that Israel's ready for it, but I think it's something that will carry its implementation will carry into the 2030s.
Wow. What are we? Oh, yeah, that makes sense. We're ready in 2026. Good point. And I know we have so much currently to talk about, but you're fascinating me with this conversation. Do you ever think about if it was a different prime minister that Shabbos afternoon? Let's say Rabin was sitting there, and I'm not being facetious, I'm being serious. Do you think he would have had a different attitude toward all this than Shamir did?
It's very possible. I think that Shamir was very adamant, and I was very close to him, and we talked very frankly over all the years that he was in office, as I did with most of the prime ministers, including Rabin. But I know when it was Modai who had told him this, and he was the Minister of Finance, and Shamir never pretended to know what he didn't know, and accepted this. The recommendation that was put forward to him. Right. I could say the discussion got pretty heated, and I had to go back and tell the secretary that it was. But I will tell you, there were other occasions where I brought a message and on a critical issue, and instantly the Prime Minister Shamir implemented it because he saw what the significance was. So this is not a criticism of him. He was a stalwart, consistent. His views were predictable. He wasn't a PR guy. But
no, I agree with that part.
There was much more to him than.
But consistent. Know. The only encounter we had with him when he was prime minister here at JM and the AM was terrible because I mean, maybe I was younger and I felt I could get away with this, but I expressed my anger that he went to Madrid in '88. And if you don't think that that's inconsistent with his general policy, Malcolm, wouldn't you agree with me that was inconsistent with the Shamir doctrine?
It was inconsistent with the pattern and with the views, and he did discuss it and wrote about it. But right now we have a different circumstance. The relationships are different. I think the stakes are higher in some respects, but we forget about how difficult those periods were, and the line up and think that what we're in is completely new. It's not. But there are many changes. AI has changed things. The whole internet, the way the ganging up, the foreign interference, the domestic bringing the war to our domestic situation, to within the borders of the United States.
Israeli officials speaking to the media, which they didn't do 30 years ago.
And increasingly, and you have a prime minister who's very oriented towards that, and is a communicator. But I think that there are, we have such an array of challenges that have been obscured or obviated, and people don't really know how much is changing within the region, how much could change, as much as the Army has been effective. We see the introduction of the new drones with fiber optics, which means that Israel can't jam them and can't trace them. And the daily toll that every single day, virtually, a heroic figure falls in Israel. Young people who are the most beautiful people, and so. The challenges change. They morph in time, but so do the stakes.
And that's why this week, when the President of the United States tried to really pressure the Prime Minister for a ceasefire with Lebanon, with Hezbollah, call it whatever you want up north, I thought he would use the opportunity, Netanyahu, in this case, because of what you just described and how things were really escalating in that arena, the whole drone thing and the injuries and the tragic deaths of Israeli soldiers. I thought he would take the opportunity to back off a bit. Tell me, did he or did he not? The reports are that Trump was really angry with the prime minister and he refused to back down. What's the real story?
Well, I wasn't there, but the story, as best I can reconstruct it, the conversation did take place. The president did use the colorful language that he is sometimes reported to use, and in this case, he acknowledged it. He said. And he was asked specifically if that exchange took place. And what I have said in other interviews and things is that you have to think about what are the implications. It's one thing for the two of them in a private conversation, and they're pretty frank, and he keeps, always adding that he loves Bibi, he works together with Bibi, he appreciates the cooperation with Israel, etc., and points to his record. But, we have to think, how do the countries in the region view this? If they think that there's this kind of cleavage between the United States and Israel and hostility, that will change how they approach it, the willingness to make the sacrifice, the moves to counter the terrorist entities, especially Hezbollah, to demand their disarmament. They're rejecting basic requirements. Not Israel's rejecting it. They are attacking all the time. And when you see the numbers, NPR says 3,500 people killed, but they never say that the majority were terrorists and that there are people killed because the terrorists hide behind the population, and that Israel was going to strike only targets. They weren't attacking Beirut as much as southern Beirut, where the planning takes place, and because they know, Hezbollah knows that they're safer there because that Israel won't hit those civilian population. And the president says you can't go there, then they're all going to go there to operate, and will continue to feel that they can do so with impunity. And it's not just the specific words or the exchange of that, but you always have to think of what are the ramifications in the larger region. Will they take it as a license that, if they hang out and they drag this out long enough, that they will get further concessions and that the U.S.-Israel relationship will get worse? And how much coverage does it get that Kuwait, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar have come under constant, but it's U.S. bases that they're targeting. Constant bombardments, almost every night. We don't even read anymore so much about the rocket attacks from Iran against them.
But now you're expecting the President of the United States to be diplomatic? Like all of a sudden now he's going to start thinking about the ramifications of the situation in the Middle East if he goes ahead and pressures Bibi and demonstrates some type of rift between the United States and Israel. I mean, come on. I mean, I'm just,
Well, we don't know what the president's real intention is. I mean, he's demonstrated in the past that that he takes into account, or he really cares about the security of Israel and has acted upon it. I think he is used to giving, as he does domestically. He sets orders down, and I think in this case we have it's a very complicated formula because you have so many fronts and the possibility of opening up again the war with Iran. It's not Israel that's demanding it. I think for all of those who've been promoting this false notion, this conspiracy theory that Israel drove this war and Israel Netanyahu controls it, this should really put that lie to rest. They could see that Israel's not dictating as they haven't in the past either. They've had influence because they're a key partner in it. But this is clearly not the direction that I think Israel would have chosen just in the abstract. And it's the relationship continues, and especially with CENTCOM. And it's CENTCOM that's demanding 2 more weeks of action, because when we look at the objectives that were originally set out, and we don't have to go into detail, but on the nuclear program, it's not just taking out the, quote, dust. First of all, there's a lot more that is not enriched up to that level, into the military level, 60% plus. You have 3%, 5% enriched uranium that has to go. But more importantly, you have to take out the enrichment facilities. You have to have a structure for really strict international monitors who are not being given access. You have to address the ballistic missile system, and not just the missiles they have. About 70% remain intact, and you have to give them credit about how the Iranians built them underground, built special bulldozers that have cleared the way that they can be reused, and firing them, that the facilities for construction of these things should be taken out. And then you have to get to all the domestic issues, the executions, et cetera, et cetera. But the main areas right on the security front were the missile programs, the nuclear program. They have all these terrible little fast ships that skirt around and threaten ships, and closing of the Strait of Hormuz. All of these are acts of war that cannot be tolerated.
It's America's one and only Jewish Moments in the Morning radio program, heard on listeners-sponsored digital radio. Rather, on the web at NachumSegal.com and the Nachum Segal Network, and of course the beloved NSN app. Malcolm Hoenlein with us. Don't forget, take a spin at our raffle that we announced, our June raffle. Go to the Raise It website, RAYZE.IT/NSN, RAYZE.IT/NSN. So it's possible that the President of the United States continues to negotiate and to encourage some type of ceasefire and, more importantly, an agreement with Iran. And at the same time, CENTCOM is saying to him, you got to delay things, Mr. President. We need another week or two to at least meet a certain objective that must be met. That's what you're telling us?
No. Well, I'm saying that they're saying they need 2 weeks of open warfare to take out other facilities. That we did not bomb the infrastructure that they retain. They are very resilient. Remember, it's a country of almost 100 million people. And they are intelligent, resilient. They've demonstrated it. The leadership has been destroyed one layer after another, and yet they continue to function. Whether in disarray or not is not clear. We don't even know if the new Grand Ayatollah is alive or not. I think that there's so many questions that we have about the realignments that will take place in the region. But most of all, the message that if Iran can emerge from this and declare victory in whatever way they want, but that they hold a parade the next day and they bring out missiles and they bring out other things, and if there's not the follow-up that addresses their capacity to enrich, their capacity to, and the knowledge you can't take away, but at least you can take away the facilities that they have. And hopefully the regime change will ultimately come. And now the reports that the CIA was arming or not arming the Kurds or others, to enable them to have some sort of a capacity domestically. When you have the besieged 600,000 with rifles given out in January, and you saw the terrible toll, and people are dissuaded because in Iran, when they see that, because they see the West can't deliver, and that they don't have the capacity, the weapons to stand up against the overwhelming force of the IRGC, the besiege of the secret services, etc. And no matter who we take out, it seems that they just keep plugging every hole with somebody else. They're less capable, they're less experienced, but nonetheless, The fact that they could close the Straits of Hormuz is just outrageous, that they could challenge the West in this way and cost hundreds of billions of dollars with all those ships sitting out, the rising of the price of oil, etc. We should have been able to break this right away.
Yeah, and at this point, if there is some type of agreement and if they're reopened freely, a lot of people say it's too little too late. That, the way, and I don't know anything about this, but they claim that the way shipping works, we're going to be so many months behind that it's not going to help in the attempt to get prices down and to get oil reserves refilled, et cetera, et cetera. So it may just be, at this point, excuse the pun, but that ship has sailed.
I'm not excusing it, but the ship hasn't sailed. We still can do a lot, but and it'll take Iran a long time to overcome this. But they're not looking about rebuilding their economy now. They're not looking at the plight of the people with water, drought, with everything, that the unemployment rate amongst young people over 50%, the economy in total ruins, because the elite, who control 40% of the economy, the IRGC leadership, the government leaders, they'll function, they'll do well, and there is a brain drain, many young people leaving the country over time. But the message to the region is what's of concern. And what will Turkey do after this? They're trying to build the counterpart on to the Shiite Ring of Fire. They're trying to build their own. And there were reports of a shift in terms of the U.S. Special Envoy, and then it turns out it doesn't appear that he's leaving. And many in the region are concerned about his advocacy of Turkey, where he is the ambassador also, as well as Special Envoy to Syria. Syria is in a very delicate state. Shara comes here and he's looking for money and he's looking for support. But you don't know the situation and how much the process of Islamization is continuing now under his leadership in Damascus, in the big cities, as well as in Idlib, from which he came, where you see how far the education of women was impacted. All of the things that Islamists impose are being implemented.
All right. Sadly, I've got to go to another story from this week. And Malcolm, I wish there was somebody, or I don't know, maybe a group of people who could go to the Torah giants of Israel and express outrage and tell them that they must intervene in this situation. What did you think of the riots that vandalized the home of Supreme Court Justice Noam Solberg? What did you think of the light rail being stopped, traffic being stopped, and in some cases, violent and vandal-type activities taking place in Israel? I don't know if you agree with me or not, but I mean, it's one thing when you see it from people who don't stand for much when it comes to morality, but when you talk about a religious group of people or those who represent our religious community, again, I think the leadership and even the ones that say they can't control it have no choice but to step in and try to control it.
I was going to say yes, but I think the tensions that are increasing, and remember, the number of people who are involved in these activities is still very limited compared to the overall population, and the fact that most Rosh Yeshiva, others do not let their students go to these events. Or I do agree that there should be greater control over it and an intervention to what was done at the Supreme Court, and a religious Supreme Court leader. Is certainly intolerable in a democracy. You can be critical, you can disagree, you can take it, but you don't do what they did outside the home and doing damage and threatening and in the way that was manifested in those demonstrations. I understand the depth of feeling on this. I believe we still can come to resolutions on it. But everybody has to share in the responsibilities when you want to take the benefits of the state. I think that argument resonates with many Israelis. You see that more people from the Haredi side are signing up, even though it's not yet in massive numbers. But I think that a process has to be developed. There has to be accountability, and there are other ways of service. I mean, look at all the guys who whether they do it through Hatzalah or Mizaskim or the equivalent there, Zaka. It's amazing and we should find a way of rationalizing it and putting people, not to put them in circumstances where they feel that they can't be fully fulfilling their religious obligations as they would, but that you'll find alternatives. And the army has to show that it can create circumstances for that. And the truth is there are programs, I know I'm involved with some, where they take people from Beis Medrash to work in security agencies and others. And for the first 50 slots, there were 1,500 applications. And it's men and women, and it's happening all over in many sectors that doesn't get reported and doesn't get any kind of notice.
I don't know if you saw, but a modestly dressed female Israeli soldier was attacked during one of these riots this week. The police actually had to surround her to walk her out of the area to bring her to safety. So, I mean, it's gone. I know that it went way too far long ago, but it's just getting way too far already.
Yeah.
What do you think, by the way, that Iran decided to attack Kuwait? And I don't know, a couple of months ago, if they were in the mood to retaliate against anything that had to do with the U.S., they probably would have attacked Israel.
It is almost inexplicable, except that, they're trying to break the connection with these countries. I think, in fact, it's having a reverse impact. I think
Kuwait's really angry.
Well, not only angry, but they're going to have to reevaluate their position. As I said, I think we could see some real major shifts coming out after this. I think we should stop focusing on Saudi Arabia. We should focus on India, connecting with UAE, connecting with other countries, of course, Bahrain and Israel, and creating new linkages. Well, their proposal for the IMEC, and if people don't know it, look it up, IMEC, about the train linkages and the ties that can be created. You'll see how many other countries will want to be part of it. A country like Kuwait has to look for allies, and we have to make sure that we fill the void with these countries. Even Qatar, got hit and has to be thinking about it. I think that a lot of the regional alliances will collapse after the war. UAE will certainly pull out. We have other allies to tie into, to Greece, Cyprus, Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, bridge. There are a lot of countries that could be tied into new alliances in the region, and going all the way to Morocco. More countries will fall in line if they know they're not going to be isolated and have to stand alone against the forces of Iran and its proxies. That's why it's imperative that Hezbollah is defeated and Hamas is defeated. That's why Arab leaders have always called for eradication of these groups. And if they, again, can come out of this war and hold parades and demonstrate that they're not going to disarm and they're going to violate. The president, Trump, has called for their disarmament and as a condition, and they are resisting it. And the government of Lebanon seems incapable of implementing it alone. Certainly can't, but with Israel, but with the United States, with others, perhaps they could. And that would be a really major achievement. Rooting them out. Israel is moving the line beyond the Litani because they're finding, and look how little coverage it gets, 10-mile long, 10-kilometer long tunnels, not in Gaza, in along the border, near the border of Israel. How they did all of this undetected still is a mystery to many, but the infrastructure that they have there with the weapons and the sophistication of all of these underground systems in Lebanon South. We knew that they had rocket rooms in people's homes. They had a living room, dining room, and a rocket room where they placed rockets and did it in civilian homes because they knew Israel would be reluctant to hit them. And but here, the underground infrastructure is astounding. And the money that should have gone to benefit people all went into that, and then you get the false numbers every day, reporting on the casualties when there's no distinction between civilian and terrorists because they integrate into the population and they want to raise the death toll. So it's such a complex situation. And that's in Lebanon, where I do believe Israel and Lebanon could live in peace. They did in the past. They a lot of the population certainly wants it. They don't want to have this Hezbollah terror. They're paying the price. Everybody pays the price for it. And in Gaza, the situation is different.
Finally, clear up this confusion for me. In the Knesset this week, that was a vote to dissolve the government or not? What was that?
There's a preliminary vote that doesn't dissolve the government yet. Every bill needs 3 readings, and they have to decide when they really want to go to elections. There's always the question of summer vacations and the Chagim, and when people are away and people will be there, and the timing. But it has to take place in the fall, so it's a question. Now when the Knesset goes out of session, so if they don't do it now, then they'll have to call the election after that, which means it'll move into November, December, but it has to be the fall because the term of this government is up.
But I thought we have an election date already, no? What was it? October?
We always have election dates.
No, October something like that. That would move under this.
You need to get 3 months' notice to hold an election. That's the law.
Got it.
And so if you don't call the election until after the recess, they can always be called back for emergency session. But that's why a lot of people are pressing now for it to have the vote now.
All right. So the election basically is going to be in either October or November, essentially.
Probably.
Wow. I'll tell you. We could use a change at the top. I don't know if you agree with me. We could use a change at the top. I've been saying.
Depends how far up you're going, but
I've been saying this since October 7th. On October 8th, I said we need a change.
This is the Israeli Olympics or elections or Israel's Olympics, and it'll be contested, as you know, because you have new players coming and new parties.
Right.
There'll be a lot of shakeout in this. And as you said, even within Likud, for instance, there are people who want Netanyahu to continue. There are those who don't. The polls vary consistently in an inconsistent fashion, which is typical of Israeli politics. So I wouldn't bet on anything right now. I wouldn't go to those betting sites, where people predict what it is, because no matter what you think, they will come out differently.
Yeah, that's probably true. Have a wonderful Shabbos. Thanks for joining us. We'll speak again next week.
Have a good Shabbos. Everybody should be well.
Malcolm Hoenlein with us. Weekly update here at JMN. Today was an interesting weekly update. Started with a whole history lesson and then drifted into current events. Oh, so much going on. It's unbelievable. JM&M, thanks for joining us on this Friday morning broadcast. It is the 5th of June, this 20th day in the month of Sivan.